Okay, good morning. Today's daf is daf Kuf Aleph, 101 in Masechet Menachot. We started the 12th perek yesterday. Let me share my screen and we will really get started this morning. So, yesterday, as we began the 12th parak of Menachot, we learned that redemption is possible for a mincha offering that became tamei prior to its placement in a vessel that sanctifies the offering. So again, if it became tamei and it then became, and you haven't yet put it in the klisha race in which all the mixing and everything is going to be happening, well, then you can redeem that mincha offering and everything, and use the funds that are associated with it to buy an alternative mincha offering. We also saw that Shmuel said that actually, when we reference tamei in the Mishnah, that actually wasn't in that instance. It wasn't actually specifically only when it became tamei. Shmuel says that redemption is possible even if the mincha did not become tamei. And the fact that we mentioned tuma in the Mishnah, it's because of the next line. And the next line of the Mishnah says that once the mincha is in a sanctified vessel, it can't be redeemed. And what it's telling us is it can't be redeemed even if it is tamei in that situation. As if it were tamei, that gives an extra reason for its redemption. But when it comes to redeeming it before it's in the kli, the truth is that you can redeem it even if it's not yet tamei. Now we will see in the middle of today an alternative viewpoint that says that no, you can only redeem it if it's tahor. If it's tamei, you cannot redeem it if it's tahor before you put it in the vessel, and we'll see some of the details of that argument as we go through the day. Now, we saw yesterday that the question was asked. Okay, well, if in fact you can be redeem the mincha offering even if it's tahor, and that once you put it in the kli sharet, you cannot redeem it even if it's tamei. That's all kind of obvious. Like what would be the chiddush about the second line about the fact that you cannot redeem it? Of course you can't redeem it. The answer is that we might have thought that tuma and blemishes were similar. That just as you can redeem an animal that has a blemish, you can redeem a mincha that is tamei. And the reason that we might have thought that is because the Torah itself uses the language of tuma in connection with an animal that has a blemish. So just as a blemished animal can be redeemed, so could a tamei mincha. So our Mishnah is telling us that you might have thought that, but in fact it's not true. A tamei mincha cannot be redeemed once it's been placed in a sanctified vessel. And so now, as we pick up at the top of the top line of Kuf Aleph Amud Aleph, the second to last word on that line, the Gemara seeks the source for the analogy of tuma and animal blemishes. So it says, Uvalmu mehecha ikre tamei. Where in the Torah does it say that a blemished animal is called tamei? Titania, well, we have a brisa that quotes it in particular. The Torah says, Vayikra Perak Kav Zayin Pasuk Yud Aleph V'im Kol Behema Tamei Asher Yakrivu Mimenu Karban Lashem. And if it's a tamei animal from, and this is the end of Vayikra, this is dealing with the valuation of exchanges and things of that sort. And if it's a tamei animal from which they will not bring an offering to Hashem, so what do we say about that? So the Gemara explains, what does that mean? It's talking about a blemished animal that can be redeemed, and they're going to be redeemed, and that's going to be the funds for the Beit HaMikdash. How do you know? How do you know that it's actually a blemished animal that's getting redeemed and not a an unblemished animal that was going to be a sacrifice and is actually truly tamei. After all, the verse says tameah. So Kishahu Omer. Well, you know what? We have another pasuk that helps clarify because later on, Perek Kav Zayin pasuk Kav Zayin v'im bebehema tmeya ufada ve'erkecha. And if you have a tamei animal and you redeem it according to the assessment, well then hare behema tmeya mura. That is a specifically another instance of referencing a tummy animal. So it can't be that they're going to be two identical references. So ani mekayem v'im kol behema tmeya. How do I understand the first one, the verse 11 in Parakav Zayin? That Babali Mumin Sheniftin Akasum Medaber, that is talking about a situation where a Balmum could become redeemed. And so as a result, that's the situation. And so therefore, we're talking about we see that a blemished animal is referred to as tamei. And so that's why we might have thought that just as a tamei slash blemished animal can be redeemed, so too maybe tamei mincha offering could also be redeemed. And we say that it cannot be redeemed if you've already put it into a service vessel. So Yachol Yipadu. But the brisa continues, and we made the point that we wanted to make from the brisa, but the brisa is going to continue. Yachol Yipadu al mumover. I might have thought that maybe that we could even do this redemption even for some kind of blemish that is not going to last. Talmud Lomar Asher Lo Yakrivu Mimenu Karban Lashem. It's a blemish that will never be able to be offered as an offering to Hashem. Misha Eina Kreva Lashem Kolikar. It's talking about a blemish that can't be brought at all. Yeah, maybe you don't want to bring a temporary blemish with a temporarily blemished animal today, but if it's only temporary and you can bring it tomorrow, so then that is not going to be included in the redemption permission that is involved in verse 11 of Perek Kav Zayin of Vayikra. So so we've now proven that we've answered our first question. And so we go back to Shmuel's comment. And again, Shmuel said that a mincha can be redeemed prior to its placement in a sanctified vessel, a position that the Gemara now challenges based on the end of our Mishnah. So Moshe Rav Huna Bar Manoach Bar Manoach ha'ofos v'ha'etzim v'halavona uchlei shares shenitmeu ein lahen pidyon, that we said in our Mishnah that when it comes to birds, wood, lavona, and service vessels, if they become tameh, you don't redeem them. Shalom namar pidyon ela b'behema, because the Torah only references redemption in connection with animals. So if we're saying so, bishlama ovos kedushas haguf ninhu. Now we can understand why you can't redeem a bird. That's because a bird has physical sanctity. It's not monetary sanctity because it's going to be an offering. V'lo namar ela b'behema. And we only said that you can do redemption when it comes to the larger animals. Ela eitzim u'lavona uchli shares. But when it comes to the wood and the lavona and the service vessels, li parku, why not let them be redeemed? Elalav, why don't we allow them to be redeemed? Presumably, mishum de tahorin ba'alma ein niftin. It's because in general we do not allow tahor items to be redeemed. Bahani nami afal gav de nitmu ketahorim dami. And these vessels, even though they're tameh at the moment, they are tahor. Now we are going to explain why they're tahor in just a moment. But the bottom line is what the question that the Gemara is asking is as follows: how can Shmuel tell us that you can redeem the mincha offering when it's tahor? Based on the end of our Mishnah, it seems that the reason that you cannot redeem the wood, the lavona, and the service vessels is because they are tahor. So it seems like really tahor items are not supposed to be redeemed. Now, why is it that the wood and the Lavona and the service vessels are all treated as if they are tahor. Well, I'll tell you, the eitzim lavona lav b'nei uchla ninhu. Really, the wood and the lavona are not edible, and therefore they should not be capable of becoming tamei at all. Again, the only things that can become tamei are food and vessels, and wood, plain wood, unfinished wood, and lavona, the frankincense that was burned with the mincha offering on with the mincha offering in the Beit Hamikdash. Those are raw items. They are not finished items, and therefore they should not become tamei. Elachibas hakodesh mishavelahu ochla. But the reason that we allow wood and lavona to become tamei is because we of the importance that we put on things that are holy, and we treat them as if they're food. In fact, we often do this. We refer to the altar as consuming the things that it burns. And so as a result, this wood and lavona, which are going to be consumed on the altar, are effectively treated like food, even though they're not really food. As Rashi tells us, take a look. We're on Kuf Aleph Amid Aleph. We're in the Rashi in the narrow, from the top of the narrow lines of Rashi on Kuf Aleph Amid Aleph. We're about 13 or 14 lines down. Ve'etzim labnei kubule tuma ninhu ela mishum chibas hakodesh. Diksiv v'habasar, that the Torah itself wrote the word, and it is Vayikra Perek Zayin Pasuk Yutet, and the meat. And the and is coming to tell us that not only is the meat capable of becoming tamei when it's on for the altar, but the wood and the lavona that are supposed to go on the altar as well, they are capable of becoming tamei as well. L'rabos eitzim lavona. And then we're going to say v'hani mili. And when do we say that this is true? As we're going to about to see when we jump back into the Gemara. Ki mishape, that's when you trim the wood. Lahu v'nasranu miyafin, when you make it a little nicer. L'gzirim lebekios, and you chop the wood. Yafot, well, dechazu l'ma'archa, so that it becomes fit to be on the pyre, on the altar. So that's the situation that we're talking about with the wood being capable of becoming tamei. As we see, if we take a look at the Gemara, it's from the top of the Gemara, it's the first word on the line. It's about 22 lines down in the Gemara. De'etzim kama delo mishape lahu legazirin, that if you haven't yet trimmed the woods into the nice blocks that are going to be used for the altar, lo miskashre, it is still not, it's not going to be prepared. It's not going to be capable of becoming tamei. Lavona nami kamadalo kidsha b'chli shares. Similarly, lavona, as long as you have not sanctified it in a service vessel, lo miskashra, it is not yet susceptible to becoming tamei. And so, as a result, kli shares nami. And all right, and so those are the first two categories. What about the kli shares? Why should we treat it as if it is not capable of becoming tamei? Ho of islahu tahara b'mikvah, because it is very easy to make it tahor. You could just put it in a mikvah, and now all of a sudden it's tahor again. So the point is, well, you maybe have to wait until nightfall if you do it during the daytime, but the bottom line is it becomes tahor again. So the point is that whether you're talking about the wood or the lavona, really those are things that are not really supposed to be susceptible to tuma, and therefore we're going to treat them as if they are tahor, and therefore they're not going. And similarly a kli shares that becomes tamei, we're going to treat it as tahor, and that's why none of these things are capable of becoming redeemed, and therefore it must be that Shmuel is wrong. And because Shmuel says that a mincha can be redeemed when it's tahor. So how can he say that when the end of our Mishnah is clear that the tahar, the tahara status of the wood, the lavona, and the kli sharet make them things that therefore cannot be redeemed. So, Lo, no, you've gone too far in your effort to try and pin the Mishnah down by saying that it's specifically whether or not something is tahor. That is not the basis. La'oma emalach, la'olam emalach, tahorim ba'alma niftin. Really, I'll tell you that really even tahor items can be redeemed. Vahani mishum delo shchichi. And the why can you not redeem the wood, the lavona, and the service vessels? It's because they're hard to find, as Rashi tells us. Mishum delo shchichi. Now we're 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, about 24 lines, 25 lines down in the narrow lines of Rashi. Mishum delo shchichi, v'i havu lahu pidyon, if we allowed tahorin, if we allowed these items to be redeemed in their tahor status, parik lahu lachulin, they would get redeemed and become unsanctified. V'su lo mishkake gizbarin miyadei achrina, and the treasures of the Beis Hamikdash would not be able to find these from other people, l'tzorach ha'avoda, for the work. And so as a result, if we allow these items to be redeemed, we could end up with a Beis Hamikdash that doesn't have wood, lavona, or service vessels. So now the Gemara is going to ask what I thought was a pretty obvious question. Hopefully you'll agree. So Bishlam lavona uchli sharesh lo shichi. I totally get that lavona and the service vessels, those aren't common. You're not going to find a golden spoon out there so readily, but you're not going to find lavona so readily. But eitzim, ela eitzim, mishkach shchichi, wood, isn't that all over the place? Can't you find wood all over the place? So as a result, how come you're saying that wood's not common? No, eitzim nami. Actually, wood, the kind of wood that we're looking for, is uncommon. Kavan de Amar Mar, because we taught, this is a Mishnah in Midot, a Parak Bet Mishnah Hay, Kol Eitz Shenimtza Bo Tolas Pasul Lagabi Mizbeach, that any wood that has worms in it is going to be invalid for the altar. So hilkach lo shchichi. And you know what? Most wood has, if you look at it, most wood is going to have worms in it. And so as a result, finding the kind of wood that we need, that's going to be uncommon. Okay, so that was challenge number 1, and Shmuel has survived it. Challenge number 2, Amar of Papa. Ishmiale l'Shmuel hadatanya. I think that if Shmuel heard what the following brisa, he would have retracted what he's going to say. Hamaspis tamimim levedek abayis. If you dedicate an unblemished animal for the service of the altar, for the service of the Beis Hamikdash, for the upkeep of the Beis Hamikdash. Now, you're not supposed to do that. The rule is that if you have an unblemished animal, you're supposed to give it as a sacrifice at the Beis Hamikdash, not give it to the not give it for the upkeep. The upkeep animals are only kedushas damim. They only have monetary sanctity, whereas a sacrifice, and an unblemished animal could be a sacrifice. Of course, we're talking about animals of the right sort, but in any event, that unblemished animal could have been a sacrifice, and therefore it would have gotten a holier level of kedusha, meaning it would have been sanctified with, it would have had bodily sanctity, not just monetary sanctity. And so, therefore, if you do the wrong thing and you sanctify an animal for the upkeep of the Beis Hamikdash, the Brisa says, "Ein podenosan el mizbeach." You can only redeem it for use in the altar. Meaning, how does the Beis Hamikdash get the money out of this monetarily dedicated animal? Well, they'll sell it. And what are they going to sell it for? Well, they have to sell it to somebody who commits to using it as a sacrifice on the altar. So shekol haroi lemizbeach, because anything that is fit for the altar, eino yotze midei mizbeach laolam, never leaves the altar ever. So similarly, okay, so what's the implication? The afal gav to kedushas damim ninhu, and this is true even though the animal was only had monetary sanctity. So too with our mincha, ein niftin ho b'torenheim, and it can't be redeemed. So because it's tahor. So hava haderbe. So wouldn't Shmuel have seen this and retracted his statement? After all, based on this brisa, it certainly seems like you would say that if something is tahor and is fit for the altar, even if it has only monetary sanctity, like a mincha offering before you put it in a service vessel, well, then you can't not let it go onto the altar. You can't redeem it. So, Hava Hadarbe, wouldn't Shmuel have retracted? So, no, the Gemara says not so. Velohi, it's not correct. That's not right. Shemiela, you know what? Shmuel did hear this. Velo Hadarbe, and he didn't retract his opinion. Because why? Lav Amrat Hassam. After all, didn't you say over there, talking about the wood and the Lavona, Kaven de lo shchichi lo miparke, that why can't you redeem them when they're tahor? It's because they are very uncommon. So hachanami, Kaven de shchiche mumin divpasle bebehema, because many animals have some kind of blemish. For example, the afilu bedokin shebe'ayin, even a bedok in the eye, which is translated here as a cataract, nami pasle, it's also going to disqualify the animal. Hilkach lo shchichi. Therefore, the unblemished animals, the tamimim animals, are uncommon. And so as a result, just like the wood and the lavona cannot be redeemed because maybe the Beis Hamikdash will be left without any wood or lavona, so too, if it's tahor, so too the tahor animals cannot be redeemed, or cannot, if you have an unblemished animal that has been donated to the Beis Hamikdash for upkeep of the Beis Hamikdash, you can't let it leave the Beis Hamikdash and not have it be a sacrifice. So you have to sell it as a sacrifice because we're worried that we'll have too few pure, unblemished animals. So as a result, that's why Shmuel would agree with this brisa that you cannot allow redemption of the animal other than for use on the altar, other than for as a sacrifice. But he would still say, when it comes to a mincha offering, where there's tons of flour out there, you're allowed to redeem even a tahor mincha offering. Even though there's nothing wrong with this mincha offering, we'll still allow you to redeem it. Okay, so that is we've finalize Shmuel's position, and now we're going to hear that he's not the only viewpoint. There are other viewpoints. So let's take a look. So first we're going to have Rav Kahana. Rav Kahana Amar Tamei and Nifted, that when it comes to a Tamei mincha offering or Nesachim, that is capable of being redeemed. However, Tahorin ain't niftin. If they're Tahor, they cannot be redeemed. And that's because he's going to apply a more bright line rule. If it's Tahor, no redemption. If it's Tameh, yes, redemption. V'chein amar Rabbi Oshia. And Rabbi Oshia said the same thing. Tameh and niftin, Tahorin ain't niftin. But there's another view with respect to Rabbi Oshia. Amar Rabbi Oshia, afilu Tahorin niftin. No, even the tahor can be redeemed, meaning that we have two different viewpoints, whether Reb Oshia is like Rav Kahana or he's like Shmuel. But we don't know for sure. Now, we are going to try at the end of today to prove one direction or the other. We'll see in a moment. But right before we get to that, we get a third and compromise position. Rabbi Lazar Omer, Rabbi Lazar says, Kulan Tamei and Niftin, certainly everything that is Tameh can be redeemed when it's talking about a mincha offering. Tahorin ein niftin, In general, you're not going to be able to redeem it if it is tahor, with one exception. Except for the mincha associated with a sinner. As a reminder, there is a korban ola v'yored, where if you're poor, you offer a mincha offering. If you're a little wealthier, so then you offer birds. And if you're a little wealthier than that, you offer an animal. And so the point is, if you, when it comes to a sinner's mincha, shaharei amra Torah, the Torah says mechataso and alchataso. It says mechataso in Vayikra, Perek Hey, Pasuk Vav, and Pasuk Yud, and it says alchataso in Pasuk Yud Gimel. Now the Psukim Vav and Yud are talking about the wealthy sinner and the medium sinner, the sinner who's going to bring birds. And so note that mechataso means from his sin, implying that sometimes something less could be involved. And we'll see in Rashi. Rashi teaches us what the Gemara says elsewhere, as to sort of what the source of this lesson is. And when it comes to the third, the phrase al chataso, that's in connection with the mincha offering, of the poorest sinner in these situations. So let's take a look at that Rashi. It's chutz minchas chote. The Rashi from the bottom of the Rashi, it's 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, about 20, 21 lines up. Chutz minchas chote. Shafilu tahora niftit. That you know what? When it comes to the mincha of a sinner, that can be redeemed even if it's tahor. Shaharei Amra Torah bekorban ola v'yored, because when it comes to the korban ola v'yored that we have at the end of Parshas Vayikra, it says michataso and alchataso. It says both of those phrases. Bekivsa oseira, when it comes to the lamb or the goat, it says B'torim, and when it comes to the birds, ksiv mechataso. That's again Vayikra Parakeh Psukim Vav and Yud. It says mechataso. Ubemincha ksiv, and when it comes to the mincha, it says al chataso. Vidarshinan beperek basra decreasus, and we have a lesson that is in the last chapter of Maseches Krisus. Daf Kov Zayin Amud Bet. So Dilahachi Ksiv Mechataso. Here's why the Torah chose to write Mechataso from his sin. Bekivsa when it comes to the sheep, when it comes to the lamb. Demashma mitzas chataso, because it implies a portion of his sin. She'im haya ashir, because if the person was wealthy, kishatime mikdash, when he did the sin of making the Beis Hamikdash, being in the Beis Hamikdash while tameh, but he did it by accident, or he did it on purpose, and therefore he needs to. He didn't. No, he did by accident. And he didn't, and so as a result, he needs to offer this specific sacrifice. And he now vehifrish mos lekivsa o seira, and he set aside money for the lamb or the kid or the goat, vehani, and then he became poor. And so now he's supposed to, if he had set aside the money after he became poor, he would have been able to offer either birds or a mincha offering. And so now, even though he's already set aside the money, the yavi miktsas demei torim o mincha, he can use some of the money. He doesn't have to use all of the money, and he can buy birds or a mincha. Vashar chulin, and even though he set aside the rest of the money for a larger animal, because he became poorer, the Torah has mercy on him, and he is able to just buy the bird or the mincha. Ulahachi ksiv gabi asirit haifa. And then similarly, when it comes to the 10th of the ephah, it says al chataso, on his chatas. Demashma Yosef, that he should add something. And that's dealing with the opposite situation. She'im haya ani v'hifrish asiris haifa. If he was poor and he set aside the 1/10 of an ephah, v'heshir, and then he became wealthy, yifdena, he can redeem that mincha offering, v'yosef alamos, and add more money to it. Vayavi kivsa osira, and now he, because he became wealthy, he can offer the lamb or the kid. And so of the goat. And so as a result, that's the situation. And so as a result, Rabbi Elazar would say in that situation, actually, there's almost a compromised position. Okay, so now back to that position of Rabbi Oshia, where we're not sure which one was his position. Is his position like Shmuel, that even something that's tahor can be redeemed? Or is his position like Rav Kahana, that only something tameh can be redeemed and not something tahor? So that is going to be where we're going to go next. So Amr, and we're gonna get to the point, and we'll see that we have no proof, but this statement of Rabbi Oshia is going to lead us into even tomorrow's daf. So Amr Rabbi Oshia, Shamati Pigel b'mincha. I heard that when it comes to Pigel by a mincha, that again, you have in mind that you're going to eat it at the wrong time. L'Rebbe Shimon Eino Mitame Tumas Ochlin, that such a mincha offering, because it's no longer considered food, it's no longer permitted to be eaten, it is not going to convey food tuma. As Rashi tells us, L'Rebbe Shimon, 4 lines up from the bottom of Rashi, Da'amar l'kaman kol ha'asr b'hana, anything that is prohibited to benefit from, Eino Mitame Tumas Ochlin, it will not convey tuma of food. And this mincha, that is a pigel that had the thought about eating it at the wrong time, is considered not something that you can't benefit from it. Ditnan, as we learned in a Mishnah, ha'orla uklei kerem, when it comes to orla, that's produce from the first 3 years of a tree, or klei kerem, that's a mixture of a vineyard and vegetables, or wheat. Vishor aniskal, or an ox that is supposed to be stoned. That actually connects to this past week's Torah portion, because we deal with bestiality, and that is one of the examples of an animal that is stoned. The egla arufa, and the animal that is the calf that has its decapitated as a result of finding a dead body between 2 cities, and we go down to a body of water, and decapitate the egla, the calf, v'tzipora mitzora, and the birds of a mitzora, upeter chamor, and the firstborn donkey, uvasar b'chalav, and meat with milk, kulam mitmeyin tumas ochlin. The Tanakama says all of them can convey food tuma, because if you don't look at them as from a Jewish perspective and look at them very generally, they could potentially be food. And so as a result, that's the situation. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Rabbi Shimon, however, says, no, kulan eimetamin tumas ochlin. None of them convey food tuma. Umoda Rabbi Shimon b'basar b'chal, with the exception of the meat with milk. Shemitame tumas ochlin hoa v'haisa lo shas kosher. Well, before you put the meat and the milk together, it had a moment of being kosher, and so as a result, that it could have been food, and therefore we treat it like food, and therefore it is capable of conveying food tuma. V'amar Rabbi Asi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, my time at the Rabbi Shimon. What's the reasoning of Rabbi Shimon? Mikol ha'ochel asher ye'achel. The Torah says when it comes to food that is tamei, or what could be tamei, it says in Vayikra Parak Yud Aleph Pasuk Lamed Daled that it's from any food that can be eaten. Ochel she'ata yachol lahachilo la'acherim kari ochel. Anything you could feed to other people, in particular, even non-Jews, is called food. Ochel she'iyata yachol lahachilo la'acherim enu kari ochel. And something that you cannot feed to other people is not called food. So, as a result, v'ha pigel b'mincha nami. And when it comes to this pigel mincha, it's food that you cannot feed to others. And so that's why Rabbi Oshia says that based on Shmuel's statement, I'm sorry, based on based on Rabbi Shimon's ruling, you would not be allowed to, it would not convey food tuma because you can't feed it to other people. So, ihachi, basar b'chalav nami. But 1 second, you told me that when it came to meat with milk, that the reason was because it had a moment that you could have eaten it. But you know what? Rabbi Shimon, unlike Howie Paskin, Rabbi Shimon says that meat cooked with milk, you're allowed to benefit from it. And so as a result, it's different from that perspective. You, instead of telling me that the meat with milk had a moment when you could have eaten it yourself, you could have just said that you had the right to feed it to other people. Because unlike the general way that we paskin, which is meat cooked with milk, you cannot benefit from at all. Rabbi Shimon says that you can. Tanya, here's the proof that Rabbi Shimon says that you can benefit from it. Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda Omer Mishum Rabbi Shimon. So in the name of Rabbi Shimon, and Rabbi Shimon is Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. When it comes with meat with milk, it is prohibited to eat, but permitted to benefit from. And again, that's not the way we paskin, but it is Rabbi Shimon's view. Shneamar, ki am kadosh atala Hashem Elokecha, lo sefashel kadi b'chalev imo. It says in Dvarim Perek Yudalit Pasuk Kaf Aleph that you're a holy people to Hashem, your God, and you don't cook a kid in its mother's milk. So, and the reference is to holy. Ulahalanohu Omer. And when it comes to a nevela, the Torah says, this is in Shmot Perek Kaf Bet, Pasuk Lamed, V'anshe Kodesh Teyunli, you should be holy to me. Uvasar Besadet Treva Lo Tochelu. Don't eat any meat that you find torn in the field. Meaning, both of these verses refer to holiness. Now, when it comes to the meat that's in the field, the pasuk continues and says that you're allowed to send it to the dogs. Meaning, let's find it. It says, "Lekelev tashlichonoto." You could throw it to the dogs, and that includes your own dog. So you are allowed to benefit from it. So malahalan, when it comes to the meat in the field, aser b'achilu u'mutar b'hana, you can't eat it, but you can get benefit. Avkat aser b'achilu u'mutar b'hana. So too, again, according to Rabbi Shimon, but not the way we paskin, when it comes to meat with milk, you can't eat it, but you can benefit from it. So as a result, why are you telling me in this brisa that the reason that Rabbi Shimon says that meat with milk is going to convey food tuma is because it had a moment when you could eat it? Even after it's meat with milk and you can't eat it, you could still feed it to others and you can benefit from it. So as a result, why are you telling me about the moment that you could eat it? That's not what's relevant. Chadva od komar. So the Gemara answers, you know what? There are two reasons that Rabbi Shimon would say that meat with milk conveys food tuma. First of all, chada de'ochel she'ata yachol la'achilo la'acherimhu. You can feed it to others because you're allowed to benefit from it. Again, only according to Rabbi Shimon, not according to the way we paskin. V'od l'didei nami haisa lo shasa kosher. And moreover, even if you ignored that, it still had a moment of when it was fit for food for you. And so therefore, there's two reasons why meat with milk is going to be capable of conveying food tuma. All right, so Meisvei, Rabbi Shimon Omer, we've got another brisa that seems to directly contradict this. Now, you have to still be patient. We are eventually going to go back to Rabbi Oshia's earlier statement and try and prove whether Rabbi Oshia is consistent with Shmuel or with Rav Kahana, but we haven't gotten there yet. So, Meisvei, Rabbi Shimon Omer, Yesh Nosar Shehu Mitame Tumas Ochlin, V'yesh Nosar She'ein Mitame Tumas Ochlin, that when it comes to Nosar, that's the meat of a sacrifice that has been left over beyond the time that you're not allowed to eat it. So there are the situation where it will convey food tuma, and there's a situation where it will not convey food tuma. Ketzad, explain yourself. Lan lifnei zrika. If in fact, again, one of the most important thing that you can do so that the meat of an animal that's supposed to get eaten as a sacrifice can be eaten is the dealing with the blood. So lan lifnei zrika, if you leave over the meat before you do the throwing of the blood, well, then there was never a moment that you could have eaten that meat, and so as a result, eino matame tumas ochlin, because that meat never had a moment of being kosher for food, so therefore it will not convey food tuma. Again, according to Rabbi Shimon, the necessary component of being able to convey food tuma is that it either could be edible by you permissibly, or you can feed it to other people, even to a non-Jew, permissibly. And this animal that was slaughtered and never had its blood thrown on the altar and now was left beyond the time period for eating it, that never was edible to you or edible for other people. However, if you leave it over to beyond the deadline for eating the korban, and it was a korban that you did throw the blood, well, then you had a moment when you could have eaten it. So matame tumas ochlin, then it does convey food tuma. Upigel. Okay, so that's case number one in this brisa. Case number two, and this is why we're bringing it, because it's going to directly contradict Rav Oshia's statement. Upigel. Bain b'kodshe kodshim, bain b'kodshe kalim. When it comes to pigel with respect to animals that are either the high level of sanctity or the lower level of sanctity, eino mitame tumas ochlin. They are not going to convey food tuma because they never had a moment when you could eat them. But pigel b'mincha, when it comes to a korban mincha, mitame tumas ochlin. It does convey food tuma. Oh, 1 second. That directly contradicts Reb Oshia's statement. Reb Oshia said that when it comes to pigel for a mincha, according to Rabbi Shimon, it would not convey food tuma. So how can you have just said that it does convey food tuma? So that totally is a contradiction. So no, we're going to resolve that contradiction, and through the effort to resolve the contradiction, we're going to actually raise the possibility that maybe we can figure out who Rabbi Oshia is like. Is he like Shmuel, or is he like Rav Kahana? So lo kasha, kansha haisa la shas kosher, kansha lo haisa la shas kosher. Now we're dealing with two kinds of mincha offerings. When the brisa was talking about that it's going to convey food tuma, that is a typical situation. You cut the wheat, you make it into flour. The flour is technically edible. You then go and you dedicate it for a mincha offering, and then and then while doing the mincha, you think about pigel. And so as a result, in that situation, it was originally edible, and now it's not edible anymore because it's pigel, but it's still going to convey food tuma. That's the brisa. And kan shelo haisalak shasa kosher. And when it comes to Rabbi Oshia's statement, we're dealing with a situation where the wheat and the was never capable of being eaten. Well, 1 second. Hechidami delo haisalak shasa kosher. What's that situation? Da'aktishenu b'mechubar. It's when you sanctify it for the purpose of a mincha when it's still growing in the field. So v'lifrakinu. So, but that doesn't work. Let him redeem it. So now we come to the effort to prove who Rabbi Oshia is like. So lishna dama Rabbi Oshia tamein niftin tahorin ein niftin. Well, if you tell me that Rav Oshia is like Rav Kahana, and he says that when it comes to a tahor mincha, you can't redeem it, well, then this is a tahor mincha that can't be redeemed. So if you dedicate it in the field and it goes all the way through, it was already dedicated in the field, so it cannot be eaten. And then even when you turn it into flour, it still cannot be eaten because you already dedicated for a mincha. And now you did pigel with it, and so it can never be eaten. And so as a result, that's why Rabbi Shimon will tell you that is not going to convey food tuma because it never was food. But Shapir, then everything is good. But one second, according to Rabbi Oshia's, if Rabbi Oshia believes, like Shmuel said, that something that is tahor could be redeemed, well, then let him redeem it. Why can't you redeem it? So that's okay. We don't have to. That just because he could have redeemed it doesn't mean he did redeem it. And so hashtami alo parik. So maybe he didn't redeem it. And so as a result, that's the situation we're dealing with. He didn't redeem it. And so as a result, that's why it never having a moment of being kosher and everything's great. But no, you're still not great. And so again, we're going to say maybe we can prove that Rav Oshia must hold like Rav Kahana and say that Tahor cannot be redeemed because the kaven to ibai parikle. If you could have redeemed it, hashami'inan lay the Rabbi Shimon de Amar kol ha'omed lipados kipadui dami. We have a brisa that we're about to learn where we see that Rabbi Shimon says that when you have the ability to redeem something, it's as if you redeemed it. And so as a result, if we say that you could redeem tahor mincha, well then this stalk that you dedicated to the base of Mikdash, and then you turn it into flour, you could have redeemed it if he holds that tahor can be redeemed. And if you could have redeemed it, well, then it should be treated like food and therefore create food tuma. And yet Reb Oshia says you don't. So doesn't that show that Reb Oshia says that when it comes to tahor, you cannot redeem it? So, and here's our proof that in fact Rabbi Shimon says that something that could be redeemed is treated as redeemed. Titanya, Rabbi Shimon Omer, para mitama, that when you have a para aduma, that mitama tumas ochlin, it can convey tumas ochlin. So, shas hakosher, because it had a moment of when it was kosher. Whoa! It had a moment of when it was kosher? It was always a paraduma. When did it ever have a moment of kosher? And you can't go back to when it was alive. That's not food either. You can't eat it. Eat that either. So Rish Lakish explained this brisa. Omer Haya Rabbi Shimon, that this is consistent with Rabbi Shimon's view, because Rabbi Shimon used to say, para niftis al gav ma'arachta. You can even redeem a paraduma when it is on the fire. Specifically, if you have a beautiful red animal, but you know what? And you've now shechted it and burnt it, and you're almost done with the full preparation of the paraduma, but you haven't yet burned it. I'm sorry, you haven't yet burned it. If you find a nicer animal, you can redeem that at the first animal, even though you've already slaughtered it, even though it's already getting ready to be burned, and bring a new one because we want to allow you to bring a nicer one. And so as a result, the fact that you can redeem it shows that it has, even now, after it's no longer, it's been burned, after everything, it is going to convey food tuma because you could have redeemed it and fed it to some non-Jew as a nevela. And so as a result, it's based on that, because so too when it comes to the mincha offering that we're going to say is a pigel situation, you could have redeemed that as well if you say that Rav Oshia says that tahor can be redeemed. So again, doesn't this show that Rav Oshia must hold like Rav Kahana? So no. Haki hashta. You're trying to compare the para aduma situation and redeeming that with a mincha situation and redeeming that. But those cases are not comparable because bishlam para, when it comes to the para aduma, omenes lepados, it is ready to be redeemed. Why is it ready to be redeemed? Because if you find a nicer one, mitzvah liftosa. In that situation, you actually you're fulfilling a commandment to redeem it. Elahani menochos. Mitzvah liftosan, but are you going to tell me that when it comes to a mincha offering, is there actually a mitzvah to redeem it? So as a result, there isn't a mitzvah to redeem it, and therefore, when it comes to the paraduma, yes, we'll look at the fact that you could have redeemed it, but that's because you could have redeemed it for a mitzvah. When it comes to the mincha offering, we say even though we would allow you to redeem it, because there isn't a mitzvah to redeem it, we're not going to treat it as if it was in fact redeemed. V'halan lifnei zrika. 1 second. If you're telling me that when you something is possible, we'll treat it as if you did it, as long as it was a mitzvah to do, what about the whole case, the first case of the brisa that we cited with Rabbi Shimon, where the question is where you let the animal stay overnight before you threw the blood? The mitzvah l'mizrike. You had a mitzvah to throw that blood. So we should treat the animal as if you did throw the blood, and therefore the animal we should treat the animal as if it had a moment of kashrut, and therefore, when you do piggle with that, it will not, I'm sorry, when you have no sar of that, it will not convey, it will convey food tuma, because we'll treat it as if it had a moment when it was kosher, and so it's considered food, and therefore it should be subject to food tuma. V'ibai zarek, if he wanted to, he could have thrown it. The katani de ein mitame tumas ochlin, and yet that brisa says, according to Rabbi Shimon, that it does not convey food tuma. So doesn't that cause a problem to the way you just answered this question? No. Hakabamayaskinam. Shalo haisa shows b'yom mizrike. No, when we say that it was lan lifnei zrika, that it was stayed overnight before you had a chance to throw the blood, we're talking about a situation where you slaughtered the animal right before nightfall. And so as a result, there was no time to throw it, and therefore we won't say it. If there was in fact time during the day, what would you say? Mitame tumas oklin. Well, then it would convey food tuma. Well, adatani lan la'achar zrika mitame tumas oklin. Well, 1 second. Why then, in that brisa, are you telling me about a case where it remained overnight after the blood was thrown? Liflag l'bidei. Tell me another case where it was left overnight before it was thrown. Just now, in this case, it was before it was thrown and there was sufficient time to throw it. But medvar mamurim, and we would say the following. When is it that we say that something that's left overnight before the blood was thrown does not convey food tuma? Shalo haisalo shaz b'yom. When there wasn't time to throw. Aval haisalo shaz b'yom. But if there was time to throw, mitame tumas oklin. Well, then it would convey food tuma. That would be a much neater and cleaner brisa based on our new reading of this brisa. No, hakinami kamar. You know what? That is in fact what it's trying to say. Lan kodam sheira eluzrika. If you throw it, if it stays overnight, before there was an opportunity to throw it. So eino mitame tumas ochlin. Well, then it will not convey food tuma. La'achar sheira eluzrika. After it had the possibility of throwing it, mitame tumas ochlin. All right, so that is where we are at the moment. So even the bottom line is that we are still have Rav Oshia potentially consistent with both both Shmuel and with Rav Kahana, and we have made his statement. We have his statement has survived challenge. That Rav Oshia would say that according to Rabbi Shimon, if you had pigel for a mincha, and we're dealing now with a mincha that was dedicated for the Beis Hamikdash before it even was cut. So in that situation, because it never had any ability to be edible as food, it would not convey food tuma. But we are not done trying to challenge this statement of Rabbi Oshia. But you'll have to stay with me for tomorrow's daf for the continuation of this questioning line. Looking forward to continuing our learning together. Have a wonderful day, and wishing everybody a Yom Ha'atzmaut Sameach.